Hey everyone, welcome back. It's great to see all of you. And if you're just joining us, this is the next Festival of Emerging Artists, and I'm Peter Askim, composer and conductor and the artistic director. So this week we're doing a focus on social justice and activism, and have some really amazing guest artists to talk and give their viewpoints and their experience. And today I'm really excited to kick off with Jeff Scott. Right after this, please do stick around because we have a great session with Lina Gonzalez Granados on equitable programming for change, and she just made her debut with the New York Philharmonic conducting this past weekend. So she's really an incredible person and conductor and musician and artist. And I want to welcome Jeff. And Jeff and I are old friends. And I've commissioned some music from him and premiered it. And we've also worked together in a bunch of different ways. And I thought of him right away because his viewpoint on music is really interesting. His music is great. If you don't know it, check it out. I think Aurora is here, and I actually met Aurora playing music of Jeff's at the Imani Winds Festival. So Jeff is one of the founders of the Imani Winds and is now professor of horn at Oberlin Conservatory, and just a generally an amazing guy. Hey Jeff, what's up?
Hey, Peter. Oh man, well, thank you for that. As Peter said, we're old friends. Peter gave me one of my very first shots at composing for orchestra, and really has helped propel my career immensely in that regard. And I just say that he's not only a great teacher, he's a great mentor. Kind of held my hand in that regard. And you guys are in really good hands in this festival. I tell you.
Very smooth, very
Yeah.
smooth. Brought to you by our corporate sponsor, Pond's Cold Cream.
And it's good to see a familiar face there and Aurora, man. Oh boy, I tell you, I don't know how you all are doing this festival if you're sharing music together in some sort of combination way. But you know, anybody out there who's if you're looking for somebody to combine with and play some music with, give Aurora Mendez a shout. That girl can play her fiddle, man. That's anyways, what I'd love to talk to you all a little bit about is just my idea of how to broaden the scope of the classical music and theory and the way it's taught here in the United States. Um, I admit to you all in advance that this is not a lecture that, well, first of all, it's not a lecture. And two, it's definitely not a practice lecture. I don't go around on Zoom pontificating on this every other week. But I was asked to do it because I do have some pretty strong views and experiences in it. And I'd love to share my thoughts with anybody who'll listen, to tell you the truth. So just first of all, a little bit about me. I'm a New York native. Grew up in Queens, New York, and really pretty much all my life lived in the New York City area. I grew up not really interested in classical music at all, and in fact, it was at my audition week where I was doing my auditions for the conservatories in New York City, that I made up my mind that I was going to be a musician. At that same week, I auditioned at FIT and Pratt University to be an artist. I thought I was going to be a painter or a cartoonist. And the following week, I took a tryout at St. John's University for their baseball team because I thought I was going to play baseball. And I told my mother, whoever gives me the biggest scholarship, that's where I'll go to school. But I had an affinity to music, the French horn. It was presented to me when I was in the sixth grade as an instrument. Everybody in the early grades, you choose an instrument after trying the recorder. I took the French horn because it was the only instrument that no one else chose. All my friends chose clarinet and flute, saxophone, and all that, and I wanted to be different. The instrument that my band director pulled out of the closet looked like a piece of aluminum foil that had been crumpled up together, and then somebody tried to smooth it out. That's literally, and of course, when you're in the 6th grade, anything like that is like, fodder for jokes. So, the band director handed me that thing, and I was just, they called me the 10 man for the next 6 months. I had friends behind me going with the oil can, fake oil. I mean, I was the butt of jokes. But I don't know if that was actually incentive for me or whatever. But I progressed nonetheless. But I was also known in my neighborhood. Now you got to imagine, like, a really serious inner city Queens neighborhood in the 80s. 70s and 80s, really, where hip hop ruled. Rappers Delight, LL Cool J, all that. That was what was cool. And literally, I was known for walking down the street with my boombox, playing Mozart horn concertos as loud as I could blast them, because not only did I fall in love with the French horn, but I fell in love with the potential of the sound that it could make. And I was booming that in the neighborhood, not necessarily like most folks in the neighborhood to sort of show off how loud my boombox could go, but because I truly thought this music just spoke to me, and it was mainly because it really, the timbre of the instrument and the sounds of Mozart like spoke to me in some way. It wasn't until I actually started taking really serious formal lessons and then going to do like regional orchestras and so on, that I actually started to lose interest. And it was because I realized then that Mozart wasn't enough. And I didn't know exactly why. I just knew that there was an energy in me that started. And when I finally got into like All City Orchestra, New York City Youth Symphony, I got the nervous chills about playing because I didn't want to mess up. But the music didn't necessarily, it didn't ring home for me. I didn't know why at the time. But I do know now, looking back, that there was this young Jeff Scott that was sitting there at home composing his own stuff in the style of, Michael Jackson, who I turned out to find out later that wasn't really Michael Jackson, that was Quincy Jones, and then trying to play and then score out the music to the records I heard my mother playing of Sam Cooke, the great pianist and singer, Otis Redding, and then all the other stuff that my mom had, the blues and jazz albums. And I guess at the end of the day, what was happening was that I was kind of losing my interest, mainly because the music just wasn't speaking to me. And the greatest thing was that I still had this energy in me and the love of the instrument itself, and that got me through. But I spent a lot of time sort of searching for, the music that would call me. I ended up playing in an ensemble called the Imani Winds, and this goes 20 years later. And we ended up finding our place in the music world by writing, commissioning, searching out music that really spoke to us. And I was fortunate. But I do know that there are a lot of young African-American musicians like myself who were in the same bands, who didn't have that same stick-to-itiveness. The music didn't call them. And so, while it might have been fun to play the instrument, it was, I could do something. I could play basketball instead and have a lot of fun. So I tell that story And then I really fast forward to another just really short story. As Professor Askham just said, I teach at Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio. And it's my first year. And without naming the student's name, I will say that I have a top level freshman who entered in on full scholarship, killing on French horn. Absolutely monster musician. And somewhere in the middle of the first semester, I noticed the trail off of his energy and enthusiasm. And being a first year professor, of course, I thought, man, it must be me. It must be something that I'm not doing. I'm not providing for him. To make a very long story short, he was just losing interest because he couldn't find his voice in the music. He didn't know why he was losing it. He had studied, to get there, and he had played in all the youth symphonies and, did the concerto competitions and all that. And he was getting great parts playing principal in this and so forth, but just didn't call, And so we spent the end of that semester and the following semester trying to find a way to keep him playing the horn with some energy. And it ended up being that we just would combine our lessons with him bringing in stuff that spoke to him, musics, transcriptions of pieces that he liked, things just like that. And like I said, I don't want to get too deep into it, but there was just a resurgence in this incredible young musician that I recognized as part of me. That was me reincarnated. And I don't think he would have made it 10 years later to find some group that would have helped him to find his musical voice. But so I'm glad I was there for him, and I hope that this is the way that he'll just continue, and he'll sort of rekindle that energy. But it's a common story. And I will go a little bit now to a little bit of my lecture part of all this, and say that my feeling about classical music when it comes to conservatory pedagogy is that what we're actually doing is we are teaching not just music, but we're teaching the story of us, our story. Every country does it. If you go to France, they tell the story of the French great composers. You go to Germany, tell the story of the great German composers. Wherever you go to Brazil, you can study pagode, and you can study all kinds of great folk music in schools where they teach you by note, without any scores. And that's a country pride of the music that they have. You also are teaching how your music fits in the musics of the rest of the world. There's a reason why composers like Bernstein, Copland, Debussy, Stravinsky are all attracted to jazz and blues, because it's great music. It's simply great music. And for lack of a better term, because of various types of racism, this country has yet to truly embrace our very own music. Our own music that was created here by us as their own, jazz and blues. And it has been my charge in life, whether I thought of it as such outright, or if it was given to me, or if I was carrying the torch and I didn't even know it, to expand the knowledge of, and hopefully the acceptance of our music. There are a lot of people doing it, but there's just some fundamental things that have to happen in order for it to become more commonplace in our pedagogy. So I don't know how many people are absolutely just on blind screen and able to participate, but I have just a small little participation thing that I'd like to do. If you are available to put your screen on, it would be real helpful at this point. Anyone who's available to be on screen. Fantastic. Thank you all, Simone. Yeah. Anybody who can be on screen. Now, you don't have to be for this, but it really does help. Great. Great to see you all. All right. Sorry. All right. So, in preparing for this, I started thinking about the great composers, African American composers, that I only really in the last, 20 years or so have become very familiar with. I grew up finding out about the great composers, African American composers, I should say, much after the fact, much after all of my years of study. I did my undergrad at Manhattan School of Music, my grad study at Stony Brook University, and I started a doctoral program where I actually did a paper on William Grant Still. But it wasn't until then that I even knew about William Grant Still. I knew nothing about William Grant Still until I did the paper. So I decided in preparation for this, let me just see how things are on what we consider to be the Britannica, the world Britannica, Google. Everyone knows if you want to know something, you go to Google, right? And for better or worse, we trust Google. We trust it, and we usually trust the top lines. Whatever the top lines say, that's kind of where we go. Unless we're really doing some research, then we might dig a few lines down, and boy, if we're really deep, we might scroll to the next page. But that's rare. We all know it. That's really rare. So I want you all, if you can, on your phone or wherever you have access to, I want you to type in Google greatest American composers. And when you get there, you'll see a row of photos of various composers, but that just says musical composers. You'll see that. The very next line down is a tab by FM Classical, which is a pretty well-known entity. And they list inside of their list of great American composers, 20 greatest composers that you've ever heard of. If you click on that, and you don't really have to, but if you click on that and you scroll through it, there will not be a mention of Duke Ellington. Raise your hand if you know who Duke Ellington is. Excellent. We all know Duke Ellington. Excellent. However, within this 20, now I will mention these next three people that I know, and I'm sure Professor Askham knows, but if I was 18, I wouldn't know who these people are. Morton Lawrenson, one of the 20 greatest American composers. J. Unger, Eric Whitcare. They all get greatest mention by FM Classical before Duke Ellington. The next link is an even more well-known entity, Gramophone. We all know Gramophone. And they list the top 10. Again, no mention. No mention. That's where we are. That's where we are. Now, you know Duke Ellington because you know Duke Ellington, and I'm sure we all have different reasons why we do. And you might know William Grant Still and Nathaniel Dett, and Margaret Bonds, and a whole host of others. But it's not because of Google. I'll tell you that right now. And if you're doing research as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, what are the great composers? I know Mozart, I know Beethoven, I know Strauss. And you type in, you'll never Because you're 14, you're not gonna scroll down, you're not gonna go to the next page. That's where we are. Um, and I should also pause just for a second because this is actually starting to sound like a lecture. And I really do want this to be as interactive as possible. And I see a couple of things in the chat. If you have anything that you just want to interject at any point, I'm really not here to talk at you, although I do have some more things to share. I'm going to look in the chat here. Oh, that's all. All right. All right. There's nothing. So anyone who wants to ask a question, or just comment, you can use the hand wave thing, or you could put something in the chat. I see Simone. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to say it really resonated with me when you said that you have the students who's falling out with music because there's not this music that feels or speaks to home. And I've done that in the last few years. Once I finished my undergrad, I was just tired of playing Bach and Dvorak and Elgar, and even though I loved it, like that was music that I breathed, and then now it's like I don't care. And I spent this last year improvising and working on music only by African American composers, and I was like, oh, like this sounds like home, and it's like that is so important. I just really wish that more people spoke about that because I mean, classical music is mostly white, and I'm assuming most people feel that they are heard or they feel some sense of home when they hear that. But hearing Coleridge Taylor Perkinson and Adolphus Hailstork, like that was insane to be like, oh my gosh, this really sounds like sounds like something from the ancestors.
You hear your experience in that music.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's what we want in any walk of life, in any career we choose. We want to feel the experience of our parents, their parents, in that. You want to feel that in whatever it is you're pursuing, whether it be you want to be a sports person. I want to see, I aspire to be like Reggie Jackson. That's why I wanted to do anything, is because I saw an African American man doing great things on television. And it didn't have anything to do with comedy. It was something different. It was, he was being, admired. I didn't have that for classical music. And so I just didn't know what to do. And so I walked through my teenage years not really knowing which way I was going to go. So it would have been art or baseball or maybe music, but I didn't have that. And it certainly wasn't presented to me in my years of study through conservatory. And so I admire you for sticking to it, first of all, and finding your voice, But I think it's now, it's really all of our jobs. It's your job. It's my job to speak on it. It's your job to speak to it as well, to perform the musics that are available by other composers. And it's really educators' jobs, whether it be solo educators, institutions, to expand the focus. It was never meant for, and I have one more thing I want to do online with you guys before I get too deep into this, but just say, it was never meant for American classical orchestras to represent everyone. So I'm not going to, the elephant in the room is, yes, I know that. We all know that, right? But that's because of a form of racism that we are going to sit here and say we are a long way from the worst of it, let's say, the worst of it. And so, at least in the musical community, we have to be very mature and progressive about what we consider to be American music. And American music includes not only jazz and blues, but it includes the great African American composers. And so I have one more just like head shaking thing and this was all literally like this morning over coffee. Type in now to your Google, greatest African American composers. And this time we're going to go straight to the top line where you see the photos. And I want you to scroll. And when you get to Martin Luther King Jr., stop and say, I didn't know that. When you get to James Baldwin, stop and say, I didn't know he composed. I don't even, I'm sort of speechless because I don't even know where to begin. Like, what kind of ridiculous, disgraceful. I mean, it's a disservice to anyone with any sort of musical intelligence to tell me that Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the greatest African American composers. That's Google. And if you're 12, you go to your parents, you go, oh, I didn't know. What did he compose? That's where we are. They just group all of us all together. He's great. Of course, he was a great human being. He didn't compose anything. But Google puts him in that category. That's where we are. So that's why I say it's all of our jobs. I mean, I don't know. I got to call Mr. Google. So I send Mr. Google an email. Let's say, come on. I mean, really? Really? Can we get this right? But it's all of our jobs. I mean, that's just, it's just pretty evident to you, and then not much else needs to be said. So the next thing I'll talk about is, sort of things that I personally and folks that I am involved with have been doing. I teach at Montclair. I used to teach at Montclair State University. I teach at Oberlin Conservatory, and Aurora's laughing because she was there when I was there. And the first thing I asked my fellow professors was if we could modify the entrance requirements to include other musics by lesser known composers. And so if you study French horn at Oberlin Conservatory, you will have had to have played the head from Straight No Chaser in order to get in. My first, I have 6 new students coming in the fall. And you can only imagine the emails that I got from them and their parents. I gave them the music and I gave them the links to the best recordings. And I said, just do what you hear and do the best you can. And I'll teach you the rest when you get here. The first semester, I invited a dear colleague of mine who happens to play horn, but is just one of the greatest jazz musicians I know. His name is John Clark. And he did a seminar on blues. And all 21 of my students over a 3-hour lecture class learned about the blues, got up and played a blues, and soloed in a blues. And not a one neglected to tell me it was one of the greatest and frightening experiences they'd ever gone through. But it was just a beautiful thing to see, to open up the possibility for someone to learn a music that's, like I said, it's our own music. My 5-year-old, he can't play an instrument, but he knows how to sing the blues. Every time he gets on my nerves about wanting some more candy, we do the I Got No Candy Blues song. Do 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 do. Dobby wants candy. Do 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 do. Ain't gonna get none. Do 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 do. And then he continues on, and he does the chord changes and everything. Yeah, da 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 da. He knows the whole thing. He's gonna know the blues coming in, whether he plays an instrument or not. It's our music, It's our music, and there's a debate, I could say, and a worthwhile debate about where the focus should be. If it should be still on European pedagogy and then include blues, if it should be blues and include European pedagogy, if it should be both and let the students be sort of influenced by both, or if it should be both and we let them choose. What is it that we're teaching? And this kind of goes off the topic a little bit, slightly. But in a recent faculty Zoom meeting, I called what we are doing in conservatories borderline Ponzi schemes. Because I'm selling to my 21 horn students that if they practice these 7 excerpts and the exposition to Mozart Fourth Horn Concerto, that they're going to have a job within a couple years of graduating. And so during this meeting, I went on to this website called Musical Chairs. And if you don't know about it, it's just a website that posts all the recent jobs that are available. There are exactly 3 jobs available in the United States for French horn at that moment. I got 21 horn students in Oberlin alone. Who's going to work? Where are they going to work? What am I selling them? What am I telling them is the possibilities? That if they learn Bach and Beethoven and Brahms, that they're going to be just fine in music. I made my living playing everything. I made my living playing Luther Vandross tours, Ray Charles tours, Barbra Streisand tours, The Lion King, Imani Winds, ballet, the can't remember the name, Dance Theater of Harlem Ballet. I did it all. The Mantovani Orchestra. Pete, you ever heard of the Mantovani Orchestra?
That's especially interesting music.
I made my living playing it all, and it wasn't because of my training. My training taught me how to play the horn. When I got out of school, I started jamming with jazz bands, funk bands, guys that knew how to bend notes and growl through the instrument and improvise. And they put me on the spot and they said, well, if you're going to play with us, this is what you got to do. And I just listened and I mimicked and I did what I had to do. And that presented to other people who were hiring, showed them that this was a horn player that actually knew how to play in different styles and could do more than the Strauss Concerto. And that doesn't knock anything about the Strauss Concerto, because we all know that's one of the greatest pieces ever written. And I believe that. But there's a whole lot more to music. And you can't make a living playing the Strauss Horn Concerto. I'm sorry. And so that's what we're doing at Oberlin. There's a debate on how much to do it and how to do it, but it's going to happen. And I encourage everyone to talk about it. As students, you have to demand it. As performers, you have to be the change that you want to be, and you have to perform it. And that doesn't just mean playing the blues. That means, if you're, When Bach was creating his greatest music, there was music happening in every corner of the earth. Great music in every country. So if you're of Spanish derivative, if you're of Peruvian, if you're of Brazilian, if you're of African, if you're of Afghanistani, I don't care where you're from, there was great music being composed at the same time. Probably handed off by rote, by hand, but handed off nonetheless. Find it, celebrate it, help expand the focus. I think I've probably put enough on the table, hopefully to engage a little bit of conversation. I really do want to hear what you all have to say, even if it's just commentary, but certainly questions. And I think that was
Eva, yes.
Eva, sorry for forgetting.
Yeah, I went to Oberlin, and besides Oberlin, a lot of my education was really limited, and I've been kind of bitter about it a little bit, just because in recent years I've expanded myself into improvisation, into trying different kind of folk music. And I mean, Oberlin, there was a Balkan ensemble there that I did get to play in, but besides that, I was a very closed musician, I would say, and I found myself later in situations where I was extremely uncomfortable playing with people who were very comfortable with other styles and improvisation. And there's an ensemble I play with in Europe, and everyone in that group plays other styles. And then my first summer with them, I was like terrified because I just was so uncomfortable with doing something that's not on the page, or just, doing something completely improvised or something. And then and now I'm at Stony Brook, and there's a great improv class there, actually. And yeah, I've thought about this for the last several years, how delayed this process has been for me. And I find that other people in the classical world continue to be really reluctant to try other music. And I guess, like, I don't want to, blame specific people, but I guess it's institutions plus teachers who just kind of taught the same thing for generation after generation. But it's been kind of just on me and the people that I play with to expand myself for a large part, just because it wasn't a part of the curriculum.
Well, you and I were both a product of education from a very comfortable position. Our teachers made it in the classical world, and their world didn't change. They didn't see the growth and expansion of other cultures in this country and the influence of such. There were jobs. My greatest horn teacher, Dave Jolly, had a career in soloing French horn. That's just not the reality for this generation. And I'm not saying that everybody has to learn how to, play changes and play the blues. But if you're going to be a musician in the 21st century, you had better learn how to play something more than Bach and Beethoven. And you need to be introduced to that from the very beginning. And I'm not just saying from the college level, I mean from the very beginning. From the very beginning. So, like I was talking about my 5-year-old, so that you just have an affinity and a looseness, a flexibility in the music to other styles that open your ears. And then you don't have a fear of it. Yeah. And I think that's really what it is that, and I know that there'll be a lot of pushback in a lot of institutions for fear. Let's put it this way. If you change the focus of theory and what's being taught in the United States, jobs are going to be lost. There are either going to be less need for somebody who purely focuses on European pedagogy, or it's going to be a requirement for somebody to have that as part of their curriculum offering. And if they can't do it, they're not going to be of use to a progressive 21st century institution. And so there's a lot of pushback. You dig? But how else are we going to progress? You know, every institution should have a Balkan ensemble. I'm daggone right. You know, it's incredible music. It's incredible music. And it takes you out of the norm, and it makes you flexible and available in so many other genres, because you've then opened up the world of improvisation. I have a colleague say that, how can you call yourself a musician, a studied musician, if after you graduate, if somebody says, well, play something for me, and you can't do it unless you have a sheet of music in front of you, and you say, wait, I'll be right back. Let me get some music. How do you call yourself? What is you know? So, you know, part of it will have to be, especially for all of you who are not, you know, 12 anymore. That makes everybody. You got to do some research. You got to do some listening. That's really the first place to go. I encourage everybody to just go down the wormhole. There's just too much music out there to know it all. But pick a style, pick a composer, pick a genre, go down the wormhole, find out about it, find out where it comes from, the derivative, you know, and just explore and find the music that speaks to you. You don't have to, I mean, you might have to study Bach and Beethoven to get through your exams, but you don't have to have that as the barrier, the limit to what you study. They didn't. Beethoven loved Turkish music. We all know that, you know? So we shouldn't limit ourselves as well. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Something you want to share?
Oh, I have a question.
Is that Joy?
Yeah. Sorry, my camera's off because my internet is going in and out, but hopefully it will stay alive. Yeah, so I work for El Sistema Colorado, and I'm actually working on like a musicianship program that integrates like composition and improvisation for K through 12 students. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, what do you hope to see maybe in like 5 or 10 years, like in terms of curriculum changing?
Well, first of all, kudos to you. I mean, that is exactly the place where it should start. You know, you take a 4-year-old and you teach them improvisation by purely letting them do whatever they want to do. Want to run fast, run slow, you know, scream loud, scream soft, whatever you want to do. Give them the freedom to just express themselves without any boundaries, and then teach some boundaries, and then say that, you know, you can use these boundaries for this thing and these boundaries for that thing, and then they learn that there's, you know, different genres, and not everything is ABA. You know, that is just a beautiful thing that you do. So that's first of all. What would I love to see? Well, I'd love to see a program like that in literally every K through 12. You know, no aspiring musician, and it doesn't even have to be a musician, just, you know, a young person should not be introduced to the music of the States, our very own music, and they have to wait until they're 40 or 50. You know, colleagues had never heard of Nathaniel Dett. They never heard of Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. You know, why should a teenager have to wait to hear about, why you have to wait until you're a teenager rather, to hear about Louis Armstrong. What is that? Like, what is, you know, that should be introduced at the kindergarten level. You know, this is great American composer and musician that you should know about, right alongside Aaron Copland.
Hey Jeff, do you have I know Joy is doing amazing work putting together this curriculum. Do you have what should kids know, at that age? Like, concrete stuff. Like what should she have them doing? Should there be blues? Should there be improvisation? I know that she's looking for she's really trying to put together a really good package of like how to prepare kids in a different way.
Well, I mean, I don't have a formal way of teaching.
Sure, not to put you on the spot, but what are some of the things that you would like your kids to see when they show up at Oberlin?
Well, here's the thing. Like I taught my son the blues by song. Find a fun, it's the milk and cookies blues. Teach him the blues, and then teach him the, you got 3 stars today blues. And it's just like we learn all these great classical music when we watch Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry and all that. We don't even know we're taking in, Stravinsky. We don't even know it. I don't have to tell my son that he's learning the blues, but he will know it. He knows it. And he can sing one for you. And so I would say introduce them to everything. Don't dumb anything down. Nothing. Don't dumb anything down. Because at that age, they can do anything. My son speaks 3 languages at 5, So don't dumb anything down, but just don't tell them that they're not supposed to know it, that it's supposed to be difficult. They'll figure it out, everything, get them to dance to any kind of music from Latin America. Teach the salsa. Teach them how to dance a merengue. They won't know exactly what they're doing, but they're gonna get it in their bones. It's gonna be like, oh, that's how that goes. Oh, okay. You know how kids do. They'll get it. Teach them that. Get it into their bones. Then when they pick up an instrument, that thing is gonna be there. They're gonna know that already. They don't have to say, oh, now you're doing the merengue. It's like, oh, I knew that. I did that when I was 5. But if it's, how many times have you come across musicians who can play the heck out of Chopin, but you put anything with a syncopation, funky thing, and it's like, they might get it, but it's because it's not in them. It's not in the rice and beans. It's that they grew up listening to the music all the time. So just put all that music out there. Don't dumb anything down. Let them make fun games out of it. Make them proactive. Any kind of improvisation. I don't care. It doesn't have to be with an instrument. It could be with the voice. It could be with hand claps. Any kind of improvisation. You just do what you feel, young person. What do you feel now? You feel like clapping loud? You feel like clapping soft? Whatever you feel like doing. All right, now do something different. That's what Wayne Shorter told my group one time. He wrote a piece for our quintet, and we played it for him, and he was real quiet for about 5 seconds, and he smiled. He said, that was great. Now do me a favor, never play it like that again. Do something different. Encourage them to do what they feel. And, it'll only make Beethoven better. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I just have to totally agree with you, Jeff. I mean, even if somebody is totally focused on playing Western classical music, just my experience with musicians in orchestras, if we do jazz or we do bluegrass or we do rock and roll, that the different way of thinking about rhythm translates directly to playing Beethoven with fire.
Yes.
So even within that narrow parameters, it's you just can't be without it, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing is, this goes back to what Simone was saying earlier. You know, you want to keep these young people engaged. And it might not be through Beethoven that they might find that Beethoven is the thing that they want to do. But if you do that in exclusion of all the other great music, you might just lose them. Because that's not what's happening in their household. You know, in their household, a whole different thing. And I don't care where what your background is. 99% of us aren't listening to Bach and Beethoven at home, you know? And so keep them engaged by including all kinds of other musics and rhythms and let them find their voice in it. And they might just find their way to Beethoven, you know? But if not, that's okay. In fact, that's great. In fact, that's fantastic. But they're going to be super musicians that have a voice and feel like they have a place in the music world, playing their classical instruments.
Maybe you can put together a kiddie toddler playlist. Can I ask you for that?
That might take a minute.
Yeah, I know. But I'm putting one together all the time for my kid. And, I want your playlist too.
Well,
So the more playlists, the better.
I know one thing. It'll have at least one tune by Louis Armstrong there. I'll tell you that much.
We'll talk later.
Yep.
I want your playlist. I think Brandon's got something.
Sure.
Hi, Jeff. I have a few things. Before I delve into the topic, I just want to say that I think this is my third time seeing you in about 12 plus years. So one time I was in high school in Long Island, New York, at a school called Portledge, and Imani Winds visited. And then it was a very long time ago. And then y'all came to Tulane University in New Orleans when I was a student there, and performed a concert. Yeah. So I was like, it can really be a small world. So it's really wonderful to see you and kind of in different points in my own musical journey. So that just kind of came on me at the moment. But you bring up so many phenomenal things. I wanted to speak both as a pianist and as a composer. First, as a pianist, I was never really accepted, quote unquote, as a classical concert pianist. It was always very difficult for me. So in my own experience, I feel like I've been kind of pushed out of that world into what we call new music, and which I'm very happy with because I'm primarily a composer. But it's funny also how that happens. And we talk a lot about kids, but also how we as adults are kind of forced to learn other things. And I orchestrated a musical theater play, and I was like, what? I never thought I would do that.
Right.
But because it never really stops for us. But what you say it's just so true. I mean, going to school in New Orleans, for example, with all that jazz and everything. I mean, just that alone, and it's really important. And as a composer, when I was in grad school, I mean, people were already started, and this is a couple of years ago, were already bringing other influences into their music. I think it's happening already as well. I think people are doing more. They're bringing pop, they're bringing electronic music, and schools are like, yeah, you can write that as your master's thesis composition if you want to. I had a friend who did this fabulous kind of combo band that was an amalgamation of pop, classical, jazz, bebop. It was nuts. And this was a master's student in composition, and I think it's really becoming the thing. And I think it's happening in the schools too. Just education is radically transformed with the digital, and teachers are like, yeah, I'm going to show them this, this Cardi B song because this is a great way of how to subdivide math with the complex, drum section. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that just all kind of came to me as you were speaking, and yeah.
Well, good for you. Well, first of all, Brandon, good to see you. that you're doing music 12 years later after you saw me in high school means that things worked out. So bravo to you. No, that's just it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah.
Music's a tough business, as you know. And more than anything, that you found your place in music. Good for you.
Thank you.
Make sure you share your journey with your students, because not all of them will have the fortune that you have of finding their way to what they might want to be a concert pianist and might get discouraged because maybe they just don't have the thing. You found your way. And so it's important for them to hear your story. So don't hesitate. Never neglect to share it, because you might just save the musical career of some young person. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. No one's ever really said that to me. I don't consider my voice to be important sometimes. Especially with the current discourse, I try to make space for others, and sometimes you have to speak up too.
Well, trust me, yours is a very important story.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It really is. Thank you for sharing. And it's just been an honor. And we're an intimate music community, this music community that we have here in the States. And so I know some of you are even abroad. So don't hesitate. If something that we talked about today really, really struck you and you feel like you need to talk more about it, discuss more about it, know more about it, send me a message. It's a pandemic, so I'm not doing a whole lot right now.
Yeah.
So this doesn't. What I'm basically saying, this doesn't have to be the end of it. And I always try to help when I can. Anyone, you can find me on the internet or through Professor Askham.
Jeff, and Jeff, you're such a generous person. I know that about you, and I know that you really mean that. And so, if any of you want to get in touch with him, I'm happy to connect you, because there's a lot to talk about. We just scratched the surface, but it was really great start. And I know that Joy will be in touch with you, because I think you guys have a lot to talk about. So, and I think you'll enjoy her too. So anyway, just want to say thanks for this, Jeff, and it's really great to see you. Any excuse to see you. You're going to be doing a master class for us next week, so this is not the end either. Get your opinion on some wind and percussion players. So I'm really excited about that, and really grateful to you. And stick around if you want. Lena's super great and interesting too. So thanks.
I've had to keep my 5-year-old as quiet as possible. He's just dying to.
It's the cookie blues.
I'm gonna say goodbye. It's been a pleasure, all.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Take care.